All right, so are you ready to dive deep? Today, we're going to tackle the trolley problem.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You know, that classic thought experiment, the runaway trolley?
Oh, yeah.
5 people tied to the tracks, and there's a lever. You pull it, sacrificing one to save the 5.
It's a real brain twister, that's for sure.
It might seem simple at first, but
Definitely not.
it has really been messing with people's minds for ages.
Yeah, it really gets to the heart of, well, like, how we think about right and wrong. Especially when, there's no easy answer.
Right. And that's why we're using Would You Kill the Fat Man by David Edmonds as our guide for this deep dive.
Oh, that's a great choice.
It's full of real-world examples and even some, even wilder variations on the trolley problem.
Oh, he comes up with some really crazy scenarios.
Yeah, he does. They really push the boundaries of how we think about ethics.
He's really good at, showing how this problem, which seems kind of abstract, actually pops up everywhere, even in, historical events. Did you know Winston Churchill had a real-life trolley problem during World War II?
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
I thought this was all just hypothetical stuff.
No, this is a real deal.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so picture this. London is being bombed by the Germans,
Right.
and Churchill gets intelligence that he could potentially divert these bombs to less populated areas.
Oh, wow.
He basically had to choose which track the trolley, or in this case, a wave of bombs, would take.
That is some seriously heavy stuff. So did he pull the lever, so to speak?
He did. He decided to divert the bombs.
Okay.
And while it did result in fewer deaths overall, there was still a significant loss of life in those less populated areas.
Wow. That's a no-win situation, right? It makes
Yeah.
you wonder, would those people have even been safer if he hadn't intervened at all?
Exactly, and that's the core dilemma, right?
Yeah.
The trolley problem just throws it right at us. It asks, is it ever truly okay to sacrifice some lives to save others?
Right.
And if so, then how in the world do we decide?
Yeah.
It's like, boom, you're right in the middle of moral philosophy.
Head first. So how does Edmonds approach this in the book? Does he, try to tell us what the right answer is?
He doesn't really take sides.
Okay.
What he does is he introduces us to a bunch of different ethical frameworks.
Right.
It's almost like he's giving us, all these different lenses to look through.
I like that.
One of the big ones is utilitarianism.
Okay, can you remind me what utilitarianism is all about?
So basically, it's all about choosing the action that's going to create the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people.
Right, right.
So a utilitarian would probably pull the lever in that basic trolley problem scenario.
Yeah.
They'd say saving 5 lives is better than losing 1.
It makes sense, at least from a purely mathematical perspective.
Right.
But I can already see where things could get complicated.
Oh, absolutely. And, Edmonds also talks about deontology,
Oh, yeah.
which you could say is utilitarianism's rival.
Okay.
Deontology, that focuses more on moral duties and rules.
So for someone who follows deontology, it's not about the outcome, but about following a certain moral code no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. A deontologist might argue that killing someone intentionally is always wrong,
Okay.
even if it means saving more lives.
Right, right.
They might say, pulling the lever is basically playing God,
Yeah,
and we're not supposed to do that.
that's a really interesting point. What do you think, listener? Would you lean more towards focusing on the outcome or sticking to a strict moral code?
It's a tough one.
I think I'd have a hard time with that decision.
Yeah.
Edmonds doesn't stop there, though, does he?
No, he keeps going.
I remember reading about all sorts of crazy variations on the trolley problem in the book.
Oh, you're thinking of the fat man variation.
Oh, yeah.
That one always gets people going.
Yeah, that one really messed me up.
It asks, would you push a large man off a bridge to stop the trolley from hitting those 5 people?
Yeah, and it's even though the outcome is the same,
Right.
1 life or 5,
It just feels so different.
it feels completely different, so much more intense.
And that's why philosophers are so into these variations.
Yeah.
It's not about finding the one right answer, but about poking at our moral intuitions.
Right.
Seeing where things get a little shaky.
I like that, where the cracks are.
Yeah, and it gets even wilder.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hit me with it. So Edmonds, he brings in variations like the lazy Susan and the Luke.
Oh, yeah, those are good.
These scenarios,
Uh-huh.
they add even more complexity
Right.
and really make you think.
Yeah.
For example, the lazy Susan scenario.
Yeah.
that introduces this idea that someone is going to be in the path of the trolley no matter which track you choose.
Wait, what? So there's, like, no way to avoid a fatality?
Exactly.
That changes things.
Yeah.
Tell me about that one.
Okay, so picture this. You've got the lever, but instead of 2 tracks, there's this rotating platform, like a giant lazy Susan, with people on it.
Okay.
And no matter which way you send the trolley, it's going to hit someone.
Wow.
So the question becomes, how do you choose then?
Yeah.
Do you just like randomly pull the lever?
Yeah.
Or is there some kind of like moral logic you can apply?
Yeah.
It really highlights how our judgments change when the choice feels more random.
Yeah, that's a real mind bender. So it's not just about like saving the most lives possible, but also the reasoning behind how you got there.
Exactly. And then there's the loop variation,
Okay.
which throws in a whole other curveball.
Oh, good.
Now imagine the track loops back on itself.
Okay.
So if you don't pull the lever, the trolley will hit the 5 people, but then it'll continue around and hit the 1 person anyway.
Oh, wow.
But if you do pull the lever, it hits the 1 person first, and then might stop before it can lip around and hit the 5.
Okay, now you're just messing with me.
I know, right?
So the person you sacrifice, they could potentially become the savior.
It really shows how our moral thinking can shift
Yeah.
when we change the order of events.
Right.
Like, do we prioritize taking action right now,
Yeah.
even if it might actually lead to more deaths later on?
Wow.
These variations just show how much our initial instincts might not line up with a consistent ethical framework.
It's like the trolley problem is holding up this mirror to our own minds,
Yeah.
showing us all these inconsistencies and complexities in like our moral programming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm already feeling my brain working overtime here.
I know.
And we're just getting started.
We're just scratching the surface.
What other twists and turns does Edmonds have in store for us in this moral maze?
Oh, there's a lot more. Like, he goes into how our emotional reactions, our personal experiences, even things like our gender and cultural background, all of that can shape our choices.
It's like our moral compass is being pulled in all these different directions.
Exactly. And we're going to dive into all of that in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned. Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive into the trolley problem.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And I gotta say, my brain is already doing, like, mental gymnastics here.
Oh, yeah, me too.
With all these ethical twists and turns.
It really gets you thinking.
We were just talking about all those variations, the lazy Susan,
Oh, yeah.
the loop, and how even just, like, the order of events can really mess with our moral judgment.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is, and it makes you think, like, is this all just hypothetical,
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's not just some dusty old philosophical idea.
Right.
Edmonds connects it to all sorts of real-world stuff that's happening right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, think about the whole debate about self-driving cars. We're basically designing algorithms that are going to have to make life or death decisions in a split second.
I see what...
It's like we're programming the trolley problem into the car.
Right. Exactly.
Suddenly, it's not so theoretical anymore.
No, not at all.
Like, what happens if the car encounters an obstacle?
Right.
Does it swerve to avoid it, even if it puts the passengers at risk?
Yeah.
Or does it stay the course, even if it means hitting a pedestrian?
Wow.
It's heavy stuff.
It's like we're asking engineers to create a moral code for machines.
Exactly.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
Listener, what do you think? What would you do? Would you prioritize the passengers or the pedestrians?
It's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
And this is just one example
Yeah.
of how this whole trolley problem thing is relevant to all these ethical challenges we face in the age of AI.
Totally.
It forces us to think about who gets to make those decisions.
Right.
And what are the principles, that should guide them.
And it just feels kind of unsettling to me, like the thought that these algorithms could be making these judgments.
It is kind of weird, right?
It's like we're giving up some of our humanity or something.
I think that's a valid concern for sure.
Yeah.
And it's something that Edmonds he spends a lot of time talking about in the book.
Right.
This whole idea of moral algorithms and how do we program ethics into machines.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a rapidly changing field.
Right.
And the implications are, they're huge.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory, really.
Yeah.
This makes me think about another, like, real-world dilemma that Edmonds connects to the trolley problem. And I know it's a heavy topic, but I think we have to talk about it.
I agree.
The use of torture.
Yeah. It's unavoidable in this context, I think.
Yeah, because remember how we were talking about, like, utilitarianism and deontology?
Right, right.
This debate comes up big time when we talk about torture.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a utilitarian might argue that, torturing a suspect could be justified if it's the only way to stop a terrorist attack.
Right.
They'd say, like, the suffering of one person that's outweighed by the potential lives saved.
Exactly.
But a deontologist would be completely against that, right?
Oh, for sure.
They'd say that torture violates human dignity, like it's a moral line that you just don't cross, no matter what the consequences are.
That's the core of deontology.
What do you think, listener? Could you handle the thought of torturing someone to save lives?
Tough.
Or is that just, like, a bridge too far?
It's a disturbing thought.
It really is. Like, I remember reading about some of those classic thought experiments.
Oh, yeah.
Where you have to choose between, killing one person to save 10.
Right.
Or letting 10 people die because, killing is wrong.
It's the same kind of agonizing decision.
It is.
Edmonds points out that, like, these scenarios, they force us to face the limits of our compassion.
Yeah.
And the messy realities of making decisions in a world where there are no easy answers.
And it's not just about, like, thinking about it intellectually.
No, absolutely not.
It's about actually feeling it, like putting yourself in that impossible situation.
Yeah.
I remember, honestly, I felt sick to my stomach when I was reading about some of these variations.
Yeah, I get that.
And that feeling, that visceral reaction, I think it's important.
Okay.
It shows us that morality, it's not just about logic and reason. It's also about our emotions, empathy,
Right.
and those instinctive responses we have to suffering.
It's like the trolley problem. It's not just probing our minds, but also our hearts.
Totally.
And, Edmonds takes this even further by introducing this whole world of experimental philosophy.
Oh, yeah, XFI, right.
Yes, XFI.
I love that.
It's such a cool field because they're using, like, scientific methods to study how people actually make moral judgments.
It's not just philosophers sitting around thinking about it anymore.
They're doing actual experiments.
Right.
Collecting data.
I love that approach. So what have they found?
Well, some really interesting stuff.
Okay.
Like, for instance, they found that people are often more hesitant to push someone off a bridge than to pull a lever, even though logically it's the same outcome.
Yeah, one life to save 5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like our intuition is taking over.
Yeah, it overrides the logic.
In those moments.
It's like it's so much harder to, like, harm someone directly than to do it indirectly, even if it leads to the same result.
It's true.
And the XFI researchers, they suggest that this might be because we, like, evolved to avoid face-to-face violence.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right, like from a survival standpoint,
For sure.
you want to avoid those confrontations.
Okay.
So it's like our biology is shaping our morality, even if we don't realize it.
I think so, yeah.
And Edmonds also points out that our moral intuitions, they're influenced by all these other things too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like gender, culture, even our jobs.
It's like our moral compass is being calibrated by all these different things.
Yeah, both from inside and outside of us.
It's not just one thing. It's this whole mix of experiences and beliefs.
And that mix, it's different for everyone, right?
It is.
So there's no, like, universal moral code that we can apply to every situation, every person.
Well, that's one of the big takeaways from XFI.
Yeah.
Our judgments about right and wrong, they're influenced by how we were raised, our social groups, even the type of work we do.
That's so interesting.
Like, studies have shown that people in caregiving professions, like nurses or social workers,
Right.
they tend to be more averse to causing harm,
Yeah.
even indirectly, than people in other jobs.
It's like their work makes them more sensitive to the impact of their actions.
Exactly.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
Makes me wonder how my own profession is, like, secretly shaping my moral judgments.
It's a good question to ask yourself, I think.
Yeah.
And, that gets to the heart of what Edmonds is trying to do with this book.
Okay.
He's not just giving us this tour of different philosophical ideas.
Right.
He wants us to really examine our own moral programming.
Yeah.
To become aware of the things that shape our beliefs and how they might be influencing our choices.
It's like holding up a mirror to our souls.
Right.
And maybe what we see there surprises us.
It might.
But that's what the trolley problem does, right?
It does.
It forces us to confront our biases, our inconsistencies.
Our blind spots.
Yeah.
The messy realities of being human.
Right, right.
In a world where there are no easy answers.
It's humbling, for sure.
It is.
But I think ultimately it's necessary.
I agree.
And it's not just about individual reflection.
No.
Edmonds uses the trolley problem to explore like these bigger societal issues too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like the ethics of war,
Right.
the limits of compassion, how we distribute resources.
It's like the trolley problem is this key that unlocks all these different doors of inquiry.
That's a good way to put it.
It leads us down paths that, honestly, I don't think I would have found on my own.
And I think there are more paths waiting for us
Yeah.
as we head into the final part of our deep dive.
I can't wait to see where we go from here.
I think you'll be surprised. All right, so welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into the trolley problem.
It's been a wild ride, hasn't it?
It really has. I feel like my head is like overflowing with all these ethical dilemmas and twists and turns. We've gone from, runaway trolleys to self-driving cars, from utilitarianism to psychology of like how we make moral decisions.
I think what's amazing is how this one thought experiment, the trolley problem,
Yeah.
it's just revealed so much about like how complex we are as humans.
Right.
And the challenges we face, both as individuals and as a society.
Absolutely. It's like the trolley problem is this lens that just magnifies these huge questions about right and wrong, about the choices we make, and the consequences we have to deal with.
And the ripple effects.
Yeah. And honestly, it's left me with way more questions than answers.
Well, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because remember, the point isn't really to find the one right answer to the trolley problem. It's more about the process of actually wrestling with these dilemmas.
Yeah.
Like looking at our own beliefs and realizing that a lot of times there are different perspectives and they all have their own valid points.
I think one of the biggest things I've realized is that morality isn't just black and white.
No, not at all.
It's messy.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It's gray.
Yeah. And sometimes the best we can hope for is to minimize the harm, make the least bad decision,
I think that's a really important takeaway.
Yeah.
And it's something Edmonds emphasizes a lot in the book.
Yeah.
He reminds us that even with the best intentions, we might make choices that end up having consequences we didn't expect.
Right.
That cause pain, that cause suffering, even when we're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, it's humbling. We're not always in control.
Right.
And we can't always predict how our actions are going to affect everything else.
The ripple effects.
Yeah. And it really makes me think about empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
Really trying to see things from the point of view of the people who are affected by our choices.
Even if those choices make sense to us.
Right.
Even if we think we're doing the right thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's about recognizing that every person has value, dignity, no matter what their situation is. And trying to create a world where, where we hurt people less and help people more.
That's a good goal. But how do we even do that when we're constantly faced with these impossible choices, trolley problem situations where no matter what you do, someone's going to get hurt?
Right.
It feels kind of hopeless.
It's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
There's no magic formula.
Right.
But I think the trolley problem and Edmonds' book, they give us some tools.
Okay. Yeah.
First of all, just being more aware of the different ways we think about ethics, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
Are we leaning more towards utilitarianism, focusing on the greater good for everyone?
Right.
Or are we thinking more like a deontologist, where it's all about following moral rules?
Right. And once we figure out which way we lean,
yeah,
then we can start to look at those beliefs a little closer, right? Are these principles actually working for us?
Yeah.
For the world?
Are they helping us make the world a better place?
Yeah. Are there times when our usual way of thinking about ethics might lead us to do something that we're actually not okay with?
Exactly. And that leads to the next tool, critical thinking.
Yeah.
The trolley problem, it forces us to question our assumptions.
Right.
To look at things from different angles, to actually have real discussions with people who might see things differently than we do.
It's like a workout for our brains.
Yeah. Yeah.
It helps us get better at thinking through these complex ethical issues.
And making better decisions.
Exactly. And it also reminds us that we're not alone in this.
Right.
The trolley problem has been around for a long time.
Centuries.
Yeah. Tons of philosophers, ethicists, regular people have all struggled with these same questions.
They've all been in the same boat.
Yeah. It's kind of comforting to know that we're not the first ones to face these moral dilemmas.
I think so, too.
It makes me think about the importance of talking to each other about these things.
Oh, yeah.
like with our friends, our
Out in
families.
communities.
Yeah, sharing our struggles,
Mm-hmm.
learning from each other's experiences.
Absolutely. Creating a space where we can be honest,
Right.
where we can talk openly
Yeah.
without judgment, where
Yeah.
we can challenge each other and grow.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
I want to turn it back over to you, the listener.
Yeah.
We've explored all these different aspects of the trolley problem,
All these twists and turns.
but ultimately, it's up to you to decide what makes sense to you.
What resonates with you?
Yeah. What would you do in these impossible situations?
Mm-hmm.
What values would guide your choices?
And remember, there's no single right answer.
Right.
It's about thinking about it, struggling with it,
Yeah.
and developing your own moral compass.
And this isn't the end.
No, not at all.
We really encourage you to keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah, keep thinking about it.
Read Edmonds' book, Would You Kill the Fat Man?
Mm-hmm.
Dive into that world of experimental philosophy.
It's fascinating.
It really is. But most importantly, keep talking about it.
With everyone.
Yeah. With your friends, your family, your colleagues. Challenge each other's ideas and be open to learning new perspectives.
The trolley problem, it's just the beginning of a lifelong journey of ethical exploration.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've come away with a new understanding of how complex moral decisions can be.
Yeah.
And how important it is to keep asking these tough questions.
To keep learning.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep those minds and hearts open.
And keep thinking.